Hello, college football fans, and welcome once again to the SEC Yesterday and Today. I'm your host, Bert LaCroix, and this will be episode 9 of our Young podcast series. And today's feature is going to be a big game in the SEC every year, generally in November, the University of Alabama versus the LSU Bengal Tigers. And it should be a good one from Tuscaloosa this Saturday night. We'll talk about that in a few minutes with our guest, Ross Dellenger. But before we get to Ross, who is an LSU beat writer, we're going to take just a quick look at the series, some ins and outs of this game that's been played for many, many years, decades, but not consecutively. The game has been consecutively played since 1964. And as a side note, since Bear Bryant has not been the coach at Alabama beginning in 1983, Alabama has a 20-14-1 record against LSU. All time in the series, they have played 82 games, I believe it is, 81 games. This will be the 82nd meeting of the series Saturday night. Okay, Alabama holds 51 wins for a 660 winning percentage in the series. LSU has 25 wins for a 34% winning percentage, and there have been 5 ties in this game between Alabama and LSU. The Crimson Tide, the Bengal Tigers. Alabama's largest margin of victory occurred in 1922. The Tide won that game 47-3. The largest margin of victory for LSU is 28-0 in 1957. The longest winning streaks show Alabama winning 11 consecutive games, 1971 through 1981, and LSU winning 5 games, the years 2003 through 2007. And another interesting note, a side note on this series, is that in the last 13 games these teams have played, 4 of those games have gone into overtime. So it more often than not tends to be a close game. The last time LSU did win a game was in 2011 when that was one of the overtime games. They won that game in Tuscaloosa, 9-6. And if you recall, they played again for the national championship that year, and Alabama won that game 21-0. They completely shut down LSU, and that game that LSU won earlier in 2011 was the last time that the Bengals have defeated the University of Alabama, Alabama having won 6 consecutive games now in the series. Okay, all-time records for the teams in college football and how that stands in college football history. Alabama has won 886 ball games. They have a 72% winning percentage all-time. That places 5th as far as wins overall in college football. LSU has won 784 games all-time. They have a 65% winning percentage. That places them 15th in college football in all-time wins. The University of Alabama claims 15 national championships, while LSU claims 4. Alabama has won 30 conference championships, while LSU has won 14. Alabama has played in 66 bowl games. LSU has played in 48 bowl games. By the way, that ranks first for the Crimson Tide in college football. The number of bowl games played, LSU would be 9th in that. Consensus All-Americans, Alabama has 68, LSU 32. First-round draft picks, Alabama has 57 NFL first-round draft picks, while LSU over the years has a total of 41 NFL first-round draft picks. But enough about the history of the series. We'll talk about some of that with our guest. And once again, our guest is Ross Dellenger this week. And Ross is an LSU football reporter, beat writer for The Advocate, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, and Lafayette. So welcome to the SEC Yesterday and Today, Ross. Great to have you with us. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing very good, and I do appreciate you coming to be with us, Ross. And the first thing I'd like to do, though, before we get into football, a few miles west from Baton Rouge in the Lone Star State, we now have a World Series champion out west on I-10, don't we?
That's right, you sure do. A pretty exciting time around here. Pro baseball around here is not too big. Obviously, LSU baseball kind of like overshadows everything here when it comes to baseball. But if there are pro baseball fans around here, it's it's for the Astros. So I'm sure everybody in New Orleans and around South Louisiana is pretty excited about for that, pretty happy for that city after what they went through in August, September with the hurricane.
Oh, that was fantastic, and I didn't get all of the Game 6. That was so much going on there, but I watched all of it last night, and I like the LSU connection. I wanted to bring that up too. Bregman and Harris with the Astros.
Yeah, everybody's pretty pumped here about Alex Bregman. He was so good for so many years at LSU, and maybe the best defensive shortstop that I'll ever see with my own eyes in college, at least, and. It was always fun and incredible to watch him field baseballs. It was something, and to see him now doing it on the biggest stage possible is pretty cool.
That's fantastic. I was out there 5 years ago, just before I retired. I was doing a couple of weeks' work in Houston, so I got to know the place. I liked it a lot. And my TV reception and the channel selection at the hotel was miserable. But I watched a lot of Astros, while I was doing work, or I'd go across the street to a bar or restaurant. And, I've got a warm place in my heart for them. I mean, I remember way back in '62, the Houston Colts and all of that stuff, the year them and the Mets came in. But I was so glad, and they kept talking about when I was out there, they're really building. They got some great young players. Of course, Autull was there then. And how they were going to build and how they were going to be good. And I'll be doggone if they didn't. So congratulations, Astros.
Yeah, pretty incredible.
Okay, let's get down to the business at hand, my friend. It is Bama week for LSU, and I know that's a big deal to Coach O as he prepares his team to play. And I know this has been quite a week, or is still got a couple of days to go before the game. So just explain to us a little bit, tell us a little bit about being a reporter for LSU, a beat writer as it would, during a week leading up to a game like this magnitude.
Well, it's funny. It's a little different around here this week than normal. And I think it's probably because the expectation level for LSU in this game is so low. So many people, I think, expect it to be a blowout. And usually LSU-Alabama games are the expectation level is anybody can win, and it's going to be close, and they're two top 10, top 5 teams sometimes. It's just different this year. It feels different around here. The pressure, I think, this year is not on LSU, but on Alabama, because LSU's really got nothing to lose. I mean, they're not completely out of it, but they're pretty much out of the championship kind of picture. Of course, all that can change with a win, but being a 21-point underdog, I think everybody around here just doesn't really expect to win. And so it's kind of a different atmosphere and a different feeling around here. The pressure's very much off, and maybe that'll help LSU in this one.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, it's not going to help things being in Tuscaloosa. It's always a tough place to win. But really anywhere you play Alabama, it's tough. It's just they just don't lose very often. And it's been how long now? 6 years since that night in Tuscaloosa, right?
Yeah,
in 2011.
It's been 6 years, almost exactly, since the last time LSU's beat Alabama.
Oh yeah, and I remember that game. That was an overtime game, right?
Went overtime.
Yeah. And one thing I noted, and I mentioned in the opening segment before you joining us, was that of the last 13 games since from 2005, I believe it was, 4 of them have gone into overtime, and that's quite that shows the closeness, even though people don't expect it this year. 4 overtimes in 13 games for 2 teams is quite a lot, really. I would
right.
think.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, and then that's the way I think usually people expect this game to be really close. But like I said, this year is just different. LSU's they will be the biggest, I guess, underdog in a game this week since 1994. They've never been a 21-point underdog since the game against, I think it was Florida in '94. So just a different feeling, yeah. I think if they take this one to overtime, there'll be a lot of happy people around here, even if they lose.
Well, exactly. I expect they would. And now, how are things with Geis? Is he at full speed? Is he 100%? He looks like he's raring to go after his performance last week.
I think he's as close to 100% as he's probably going to get. With the bye, he had the bye week to rest even more, and he looked pretty 100% in that game against Ole Miss. Running for 276 yards. He looked pretty good. So I think he's about as close as he's going to get to 100%. That left knee is going to nag him probably all year. It was kind of like Leonard Fournette's ankle injury last year. It wasn't going to heal until after the season. It wasn't going to heal completely. But Geis is looking the part finally. And, Arden Key, the edge rusher for LSU's, and finally in pretty good game shape. So they're about as healthy as they've been since the opener.
Okay, and what about Danny Etling? Do you think he's ready? Do you think he can get it done, manage the game, make the plays?
That's kind of the big question, is can Danny Etling win the big game? And, even Ed Orgeron had mentioned that. Everybody's kind of waiting for Danny Etling to win the big game. And he hasn't really done it yet. He's had some really good performances. He's a steady quarterback, kind of that game manager type and all that. But everybody's kind of waiting for him to explode. I don't know if it's going to be on the road against number 1 Alabama. The big thing about this game is can Danny Etling or can LSU's offensive line block the front of Alabama, and that has been a really big issue over the last several games that they've played against Alabama, is they can't block that defensive front. So you got to give Danny Etling time. I think in the 6-game losing streak now, Alabama's had 20 sacks against LSU, so about 3.5 a game, and that's something that just can't happen. That's something that makes a quarterback's job so much more difficult.
Now, you segged right into that nicely with the offense. I was going to ask about that, what they need to do. What do you think in the way of plays, in the way of keeping Alabama off balance? What might be a possible strategic game plan for the offense to do to try to control the football and move the football against Alabama?
LSU's got a new offensive coordinator, and he does a lot of the pre-snap movement, the shifts and the motions. You're going to see a lot of that, and I think a lot of LSU fans are hoping that makes a difference. I'm not sure that's going to be the thing that delivers them a victory, but they sure hope so, that a lot of that movement will be different. LSU's not just going to pound it between the tackles like we've seen them do against Alabama in years past. I think you're going to see a team that is going to run a lot more horizontal, going to have a little more movement from left to right, and they're praying that that's going to do the trick.
Yeah, now let's move to the other side of the ball. How about defense? What do they need to do to slow down the Tide and Jalen Hurts and that stable of running backs? And, of course, those great receivers like Calvin Ridley.
In game shape finally and ready to go is going to be big. I think that for LSU to win this game, they got to create some turnovers, and they got to hold Alabama to 14, 17 points for them to win. And so it's going to be very big that they do that. The big sore spot in LSU's defense is right up the gut, kind of running the ball, and that's what Alabama does so well. So that's going to be a big chore for LSU, is can the linebackers and the defensive front slow Alabama in between the tackles, and they haven't done that in the past in this series. Alabama averages about 180 yards a game against LSU the last 6 times they played, and averages almost 5 yards a carry. So they got to stop that. That's the first thing, and then you can get to the next thing, which is maybe forcing some pressure and forcing some miscues on a somewhat young quarterback.
Yeah, and now let's move to the other segment, offense, defense, and special teams. I mentioned before we went on the air or began recording that I'm an Auburn guy, and we were down there. First time I had been in 14 years to Tiger Stadium, and of course we wound up on the short end of the stick of that one, but it was still a great time, and we were treated nicely. We had a wonderful time eating fried quail, fried catfish, fried fish. I mean, Cajun-infused stuff, and it was people couldn't have been more hospitable. But that being said, going on the road to Alabama, you're going to have to go up there and you're going to have to face a hostile environment. And I think beating, if you get the crowd out of it a little early, because we let the crowd in it, back in it, because I think LSU was ready to be beaten against Auburn, frankly, and then they got that spark. And one of the things that sparked them was that punt return for a touchdown. That really lit them up and got the crowd into it and took the team's energy to another level. So what do you foresee LSU having to do on special teams then to help make that happen if they were going to possibly win this game?
Just like that, they needed that punt return to win that game against Auburn. There's no doubt. They don't win that game without that punt return. They need more of that. There's no doubt. They've got to have a big special teams play. And, whether it's a punt return or a kickoff return or a block punt or something like that, they need something like that. And, I don't know what that's going to be because, man, Alabama's the special teams are pretty solid. And, it's going to take a lot. But you got to make a big play. Defensively or in special teams, there's got to be a big play made by LSU if they're going to win this game because offensively, it's just hard to see them doing much and moving the ball consistently. So got to have one of those big plays on special teams, no doubt.
Oh, yeah. And we're going to talk about the game a little bit more at length at the end of our picks. So why don't we get into some picks right now? How's that sound? Okay, let's start it off then with a big one from Fayetteville, Coastal Carolina. Comes to Arkansas.
Well, man, Arkansas, they've been struggling. But, if Brett Bielema is in a situation where he can't afford to lose at home to Coastal Carolina, that's for sure. So I would imagine I would go with the Hogs on that one.
Yeah, I'll definitely go with that. Should be a no-brainer, automatic win for them. But after that was an improbable win against Ole Miss last week, down by 24 points, and wow, and coming back to beat them. So they may have a little energy themselves, and of course, I think they can just show up and execute and beat Coastal Carolina. And how about from Columbia, Missouri, the Florida Gators? This is interesting. Two teams that have really struggled out in Missouri.
What's
your take, Ross?
Man, I don't know what's going on at Florida. It doesn't look like a great situation, and Mizzou's kind of on a roll. They can score some points. I would expect a really close game, and maybe give the nod to Mizzou on the road. But I wouldn't be surprised if Florida wins this one in some kind of tight game. Randy Shannon's the interim coach there. He's been a head coach. He's kind of knows what to do, and that's going to be a good one. That's kind of one of those. It's a tough pick to make, but I guess I'll go with the home team, maybe eking out one there.
I feel exactly the same way. Missouri, I believe, is a 3-point favorite, something like that. And like you said, they can score in bunches. But Florida, I think maybe Florida's luck is over with. Against Tennessee and against Kentucky, man, they just pull those out. Shouldn't have won either game. And so, but I'm also interested in seeing how the team responds to McElwain being gone. And if, a lot of times in a situation like that, they can rally around an interim and maybe create something. But still, I think Missouri will score enough points to beat Florida. I don't see how Florida can
offense is really
outscore Missouri, frankly. Yeah. Oh. Okay. Let's go. Let's move over to Lexington, Kentucky, where Ole Miss travels to meet the Wildcats. Take it away.
Again, that's probably one I would expect similar to the last game, a close game, and I would go with the home team. Kentucky's played well of late, and I would expect them to keep on rolling, just beating Tennessee at home. They've got a lot of momentum, and Ole Miss with an interim coach has blown that lead. I kind of leaning toward the Wildcats.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, Kentucky's got what, a 6-2 record, so they became bowl eligible, I believe, last week in Lexington against Tennessee, and they got a little bit of momentum, and they have the possibility after Ole Miss. They've got Vanderbilt, Georgia, and Louisville. Now, Georgia does not look winnable for Kentucky, and it is in Athens. But, they can beat Vanderbilt and Louisville, and if they beat Ole Miss, that'd be 9 wins. That'd be quite a season for the Cats, and I do expect them to beat Ole Miss. Again, they've lost Shea Patterson, and then they were demoralized yet another time against last week. When Arkansas came back, so I expect the misery to continue for the Rebels. I hate it, but that's the way it goes. But I got some good friends in Kentucky, and so I think the Wildcats win and stretch their record to 7-2. All right, and here's another team. Not a very strong team from up in the Northeast coming down to Starkville to play Mississippi State as UMass comes to the South in Starkville. What do you think on that, Ross?
We're kind of an odd matchup, but I know Dan Mullins from up there. I'm sure that had something to do with that scheduling of that game. State's just won at A&M. They're in a really good position to get maybe even a big one of those big bowls. I don't even know what they're called anymore. It used to be called the BCS bowls, but maybe there you go. Yeah, New Year's Six. Yeah, I would expect
New Year's Six
to go 9-3 and potentially go into one of those bowls. So I don't think they're on kind of a roll here. So I don't think UMass can get it done.
No, I don't think so at all. They're pretty bad. And after that, looking again down the schedule, they got Alabama next week in Starkville. I don't care where they play it. They're probably going to lose that game. Then they got Arkansas and Ole Miss, very winnable games, and that would put them, if they do win, which they should, Saturday at 9-3. That's incredible. I expected them to be more around 6-6 probably. But, Hail State, good for them. All right, here's an interesting game. The number 1 in the college football playoff poll, Georgia Bulldogs, host the South Carolina Gamecocks, and Will Muschamp.
Yeah, it is. I don't.
Now, this is intriguing.
I don't expect it
your
to
take,
be
Ross.
too close. It's an interesting matchup. It is, but man, Georgia's just they're right there. I think with Alabama as the top 2 teams in the league, and I don't think it's really close beyond that. I would expect the Bulldogs to handle that one at home.
I do too. Once again, we find a 6-2 team in South Carolina with the potential to do big things, but they do have Clemson also coming down their schedule, Florida and Wofford. So, going to be a pretty darn decent year, really, and regardless of what goes on in Athens Saturday for the Gamecocks. But again, Georgia is powerful. They're potent. Offense, defense, special teams. They are hard to beat, and especially in Athens between the hedges. So I'll definitely go with Georgia as well. And now, up to Music City in Nashville, Tennessee, Western Kentucky. From Bowling Green comes down to town to play the Commodores. How do you see that?
A really rough stretch. Maybe this is something they can get back on it, get back on a little winning streak here. I think they got Tennessee later in the year, so that's a winnable game. So I'll go with the Commodores.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they're going to win. They'll get back on track. Even though Western has beaten them before, could give them a fit. But they've like I mentioned in an earlier podcast not a week or two ago, and Vanderbilt is headed south with a bullet in a big way. And but I think they put the skids on that. And then they've got Kentucky, Mizzou, and Tennessee. So really every game on their schedule is winnable from here on out. And Derek Mason may or may not get it done, but I think he does on a Saturday against Western Kentucky. Okay, here's one near and dear to my heart. College Station. My Auburn Tigers travel out to face
the
Texas A&M Aggies. How do you see that?
They're going to hold serve at home. But I will say, Kevin Sumlin, this is almost one of those deals where you had last year Les Miles and Gus Malzahn meeting in what they called the buyout bowl. The loser probably was going to be fired at least eventually, and the winner keeps his job, and that's, of course, exactly what happened. This feels like something similar, just later in the year. But I think Auburn's just too tough, especially that defensive front they've got, and pretty good running game. I see it being a close game, but I think Auburn actually wins one on the road.
I think they do too, and putting all bias aside, Auburn has the better team, and I think especially in the trenches. Yeah, and you mentioned that defensive line, which is really, there's some beast on there, and Jeff Holland has emerged as a sack leader in the Southeastern Conference, and we'll have to get around to why he was not nominated for the Butkus, but that's all right. But I think Auburn's going to be ready. It hurts that Cameron Petway is out, and he was just found his sea legs against Arkansas, ran up and down the field and got hurt on the next to the last play before he scored a touchdown, his shoulder. And he's out indefinitely, probably for at least the regular season. And Auburn fans were really looking forward to that 1-2 punch. That could even loosen things up more for Jarrett Stidham. But I think if they follow Stidham, I think he's a great leader, and I think that I think there is a stable of backs there too, with Cam Martin and true freshman Devin Barrett, who has that ability to take it all the way. Carry On is leading the SEC in rushing at 120 yards per game. So I do think that, and a mixture of good passing, a strong defense, and hopefully no special teams breakdown. And Auburn wins. I think they might beat the spread. I think they win in double digits, but it may be close for a while. Probably should be, with Auburn taking it away in the second half. And so now we come to the game of the week. The LSU Tigers travel to Tuscaloosa to play the Alabama Crimson Tide. What this podcast is all about.
Trenches,
all right,
like it
Ross,
does every year with this game, and LSU just doesn't have the guys to compete with Alabama. Certainly doesn't have the depth, and even if it's close early, the Tide end up pulling away, I think, and winning by 10, 15, maybe even 20 points.
Yeah, that could. I think the line's like 21, and if Alabama wins, they probably should, but I don't do any gambling, but I do the Yahoo Pick'em, we have a group that plays that, and I think it was, I'm not sure exactly what the line was, but I took LSU in the points. I think they might keep it a little bit closer. Alabama always has the opportunity to blow anybody out, but for some reason I think Coach O has got them focused. He mentioned this is the game, and I think they will bring a lot of energy, and I think they'll bring a lot of fight. But in the end, doggone, Alabama's just too talented and deep and strong to beat, just about. I mean, it could be done later, but I don't think it happens this week, and I'll have to go with Alabama as well. And so, any other parting words? Any words of wisdom? Anything we should look out for Saturday before we
should be
drop
crazy
out of
over
here?
there. Looking forward to it. Oh yeah, of course. Yep, I'll be there.
Yeah, I meant to ask you too when we started. I assume you're going to Tuscaloosa. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, good deal. You be safe going up there, and have a good time. Win, lose, or draw, and Tigers and Crimson Tide, 8:00 primetime game on Saturday night. I'm really looking forward to it. Auburn and Texas A&M start the day off for us at noon, so we'll get that one out of the way and move on into some big 3:30 games, and then watch LSU and Alabama. A great day of football in front of the television for us.
You can find me at Ross Dellenger on
with
Twitter.
With that, Ross, where can we find you on Twitter and so forth?
Can be found at theadvocate.com.
Okay, well, thank you, sir. And it's been a great pleasure. And you can find me on Twitter at Autull, Autull. My personal website, birdlacroix.com, with sports and personal blogs, campuspressbox.com, and this podcast is under the heading of Sports Hacks, the SEC yesterday and today. And this has been episode 9 with Ross Dellenger of The Advocate, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette. And it's been a great pleasure once again, Ross. And we'd just like to say to you folks listening, thank you. And take care out there, and be sure to love your neighbor.